Today we're going to show you how to take wheels off of your bicycle. There are a lot of different types of bikes. They look like they are difficult to get the wheels off, but we're going to show you that there's a lot of things that are in common with all the bikes that make it easier to get all the wheels off. And we are going to show you on a couple different types. The first thing you need to do to take a wheel off, and I'm going to take off the front first and then I'll show you the back. To take off the front, the first thing you need to do is release the brake. On this particular bike, there's a little lever on the caliper that we're going to swing up and out of the way. And you can probably see how the brake pads here open up. They get wider as you swing that lever up. The reason you do that is the rim is narrower than the tire, and the tire can't pass through the brake pads when the brake is in the closed position. So in order to get that to pass through smoothly, you have to unlock the brake first. Next, you have to release the axle, and you do that by flipping. So you're going to flip it around like that. Then you're going to hold this axle in your hand, and with your other hand, you're going to turn this wing nut a few times. The reason you do that is forks have safety tabs built into them, and it prevents the wheel from accidentally falling out. So you have to actually do something to get the wheel off. And when you lift the bike up, there you go. The wheel comes out. Now on this particular bike, you can see those safety tabs right there, how they're built in. Just little tabs that stick out a little bit. Now to put this wheel back on, you're going to reverse everything I just showed you. So you're going to hold the wheel, you're going to guide it under the tips of the forks, lower the fork onto the axle, like that. If you remember, you loosened the axle, so the question is, how much do you tighten it back to get the proper adjustment? So what you need to do now is hold this lever in your one hand, and in your other hand, give this a couple turns. Now, to determine if it's tight enough, what you want to do is get this axle and you want to flip it. And right about there is where it's starting to have a little bit of tension on it. And you can see that it's back at about a 45-degree angle. You want this lever to be straight out like that when it just starts to get tension. So this is too loose. Now, if the axle was starting to have tension, like right there, I'm pushing it and it's starting to get tight. Well, that's before a 90-degree angle, so that means it's too tight. We'll loosen this a little bit. All right, right there, it's making a 90-degree angle with the bike, and it's just starting to have tension on it. At that point, you put your palm on the axle, and you're going to push with your palm, and your fingers are going to grab the spokes, so you're going to push and pull. It's kind of a combined motion, kind of like this. So you're pushing and then squeezing, and then the axle's pointing straight back. That's done. So now you're going to reset your brake. You're going to squeeze the brake just once or twice to recenter everything, and then just lift the bike and see if the front wheel spins freely. If it does, everything's great. If not, you have to unlock the axle, make sure that your wheel is centered inside the fork. So you want equal space on both sides here. If there is equal distance and it still rubs, then you have to push your brake over and just manually grab it, and you're just going to give it a little twist to get it out of the way. But 99 times out of 100, everything lines back up again. So that wheel was taken off and put back on properly. Now, a few mistakes that people make with a quick release axle is they treat it like a wing nut and they turn it to tighten it down against the bike. It doesn't work that way. There's an actual cam inside the lever, and it has to flip, not turn. When it flips, it locks down much tighter than you're going to get it by turning it. Now we're going to show you how to take the rear wheel off of a bike. A lot of people get intimidated when it comes to taking off the rear wheel because you have all the gear mechanism back there, but it is much easier than it looks. Rear wheels come off just like front wheels with two notable exceptions. Let's walk through it. To take off your rear wheel, the first thing you need to do is flip up the lever and release the rear brake. The second thing you need to do is you need to shift your derailleur so that the chain is on the absolute smallest rear sprocket. So we're going to do that. Okay, so it's in the small sprocket. Next, unlock the rear axle. Now, rear axles don't have the safety tabs that front wheels have, so you probably don't have to readjust the axle tension, but if you do, it works the same way. To unlock the axle, get the lever, and you're going to flip it. Now, the next step, which is a little bit different than a front, and this is the part that gets a little intimidating with people, the gears come off with the wheel, but the derailleur stays on the bike. For that to happen, what you're going to do is pivot the rear derailleur backwards, and you do that for a couple of reasons. One is it gives room in here for the wheel to drop forward, because that's roughly the angle that it's going to come out. So pull this out of the way, and at that point, when you lift the bike up, see how the wheel came out? Now, I would tilt the bike just a little bit, let go of the derailleur, pull the wheel out. Now, you can see the gears came off with the wheel, and your derailleur and chain stay on the bike. Now, to put this back on, what I like to do is put the wheel between my legs, pivot your rear derailleur backwards. That's going to give you room in here to get the axle and the gears to come through and back up into the frame. So you pivot this back. Now you're going to kind of maneuver the bike. See how the axle now is between the upper and lower portions of the chain? And you're going to drop the upper portion of the chain right here onto the small gear. So right like that. All right, there it is on the small sprocket. Then you can continue to maneuver down. You're going to guide the frame onto the axle. Make sure that the rear wheel is going through the brake up top here. So if you have to, with your hand, maneuver the wheel to go through there. So once it gets through the brake, pivot that back down, and then just give it a little tug. You may have to wiggle it a little bit. And then just lock the axle back down again. When you're all done, reset your brake. Give it a squeeze to recenter the brake, and then just hold the bike up and spin the wheel. Now see how this one is not spinning, which is indicative of the frame, the wheel not being centered in the frame. So release your rear axle again, and it's best to hold the bike upright and let the weight of the bike settle the wheel into place. And then lock your axle back, and then now it should spin. Now we're going to show you how to take wheels off of a bike that does not have a derailleur mechanism. If you don't have that and your chain just goes around the rear sprocket and back up front like this configuration, this is how you take this wheel off. I like to turn the bike upside down if I don't have a stand to work on. So I like to turn it upside down, and then with a wrench you're going to loosen axle nuts. Like that. Now this particular bike has a brake on it, so you need to release the brake. That gets done right here. And because of the way this rear dropout is configured, you need to take the chain off the sprocket, pull it up, and push it to the inside. Make sure your fingers don't get pinched, and just backpedal a little bit and let the chain kind of fall into the middle. At that point, your rear wheel comes off the back. Take the chain off the rear sprocket, let that hang, and the wheel's off. Now, to put this back on, what you need to do is get your chain. You're going to lift it up, and I like to hold it with 2 fingers to just keep it open. Guide it into the frame, and with your right hand, move the chain onto the sprocket like that.